You're listening to COB Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan.
Sudeep, have you seen this Zomato ads that have been going on during the IPL?
Yeah, of course I have.
I think they're brilliant.
Yeah, I think that they're nice.
I think it goes back to the coffee toffee kind of equation which had, which reinforced the brand name so strongly. And the recall is so strong once that with that kind of communication. And it's a very intelligent play on the name. Even the Swiggy ones, right? They are all pretty top notch. As in, I'd say they are on par with what most big brands or traditional brands would do in the advertising domain. Now, I came across this news that both these companies, or at least one of them, Swiggy, Zomato, have their creatives, or rather the agency in house. That got me thinking. Now, a lot of the companies work with creative agencies. Wouldn't insourcing that, and if insourcing can deliver such high quality of output, wouldn't that be a great way for all marketers and advertisers to work? Why do we even need creative agencies going forward?
So, to your first question, even before I get into a creative agency, I know you picked up the example of a creative agency, but the fact is, where does this concept of agency come from? Whichever company you work with, whatever business you're handling, you should be clear that what are your core jobs and what are not. More often than not, you will find that every business outsources some of their non core jobs. It's almost similar to running a household where you outsource some of the household work which you think is non core. You don't want to spend time on it. Yeah, otherwise, we can do all the chores that we have in our household fairly easily, but we don't. Yeah, because we choose to dedicate that particular time and effort towards something else which we think will add more value. The same concept exists with companies. So companies decide to hire agencies to do work which the companies don't want to do themselves, and would rather dedicate that time to something else that which is their core competency. Number two, the second advantage usually is that in a non-core area, you know that you will not be able to spend sufficient time, money, effort into capability building.
You don't have the capacity to train people in the domain.
Yeah, so just very simplistically, if the core competency of Zomato is logistics, so if a gun is put to their head, where would they invest their money? Logistics or creative?
Obviously, logistics, yeah.
So therefore, one of their greatest challenges going ahead would be that would they be able to keep their creative team abreast with everything that is happening in the latest environment, and would they be able to hire the best creative talent? So therefore, those are the two reasons. One is spending more time on the core job or the core competency of the company, and number two, making sure that even your non-core jobs receive the best attention from the best possible talent. That is why companies hire agencies.
Actually, that's a very good articulation of it to say how even your non-core work can actually have the same importance as your core work to over deliver. That's great, but I'm going to pull you back to the statement that you corrected me on: creative agency, digital agency. I want you to tell me, what is a creative agency?
you know all businesses, once they have developed their core brand propositions or brand promises, they indulge in marketing, which is where they take these propositions and make them reach to consumers. To make these propositions reach consumers, they need some nice, creative, attractive, memorable articulations. Those articulations come in the form of TVCs, digital creatives, JPEGs, GIFs, etc. etc. So, creative agencies are those agencies that are briefed by a company, by giving them their marketing objectives and some amount of mandatories, etc. And these agencies specialize in understanding your requirement and then translating it into a creative format. So they will make a creative for you which you can use for your marketing activities.
Now, I again want to circle back to the first point. I understand that when you outsource or rather work in that agency client model, you're able to give your non core the same amount of weightage as your core work. Now, there are a lot of the new age businesses which are built primarily on the brand that they're creating or in almost a commoditized category. And they actually do very well by insourcing their creative agencies. How does it work? And why are they able to do it right?
One could think of variety of businesses, and if you think about where should their core competency lie, you might therefore be able to come to a conclusion that for some of them, marketing and probably advertising or creative is actually their core competency. Their product or their whatever they are selling is actually not such a rocket science, and their innovation is not in the product but in the way they market it. For example, the closest that I would think about it is possibly something like Red Bull. Now, the Red Bull, the product, has stayed the same for the last 75 years. They have not innovated on SKUs, they have not innovated on brand name, they have not innovated on flavors, nothing. What they have innovated on is their marketing. And over a period of time, they have evolved a particular formula of marketing Red Bull. Now, for a Red Bull, one could possibly think and say that insourcing a marketing agency or a creative agency possibly is a viable alternative for them, because that over a period of time is becoming their differentiation. Another brand which caught my fancy is this water brand called Liquid Death, quite nicely named. It's the same thing. So now finally you're selling water. Yeah, and beyond a point, there is very limited things that you will do with it. For example, say something like a Bisleri. Now, beyond making small bottle, big bottle, changing the label color, etc., more often than not, you will not find them innovating significantly on their water portfolio. So, for them, maybe they could think of marketing as their core competency or creative as their core competency, and they can think about insourcing an agency.
That's because their creative track becomes their core competency.
Correct.
Got
Correct. And therefore, they know that beyond a point, this is what they need to invest behind. But for most other companies, if you think about, for example, say a Cadbury or Coke or anything else, Pidilite, for example, Bajaj, anything that you can think of, they keep innovating on their products, categories, formats, occasions, etc., etc. So they know that their core competency is in delivering that value to the consumer, and that value is built around occasion, packaging, format, etc., etc., and the feeling that accompanies it. Yeah, so it is the feeling is a part of the package, and part of that feeling comes via communication. So therefore, the creative plays a significant role, but still a smaller role in the entire package. And hence, for those companies, I think when you insource something like a creative, it'll possibly be a stretch, and you would again go back to the same two things. It'll drive away their focus from what their core competency is, and they will never be able to keep pace with best of the creative agencies outside.
Makes sense. I think that's a very reasonable and almost obvious sounding and therefore commonsensical reason for why that is insourced for specific businesses. And it's important for marketing teams to understand what their core competence is and therefore drive it accordingly. Now, there are a lot of the startups, especially in India, that I've seen. Very few of them even make their own product, and a lot of them even source the same product from the same vendor, but their entire valuation of the marketing is built on the brand they're creating. Would they also fall into this category?
Again, I would hate to generalize, but they would have to think for themselves. For example, think of something like Boat. Now, Boat probably imports significant part of their products from China, from a certain set of people, etc., etc. So therefore, Boat's core competency possibly would be around identifying new products, trendy products, getting their design right, getting their GTM right, which is via e-commerce, their own website, as well as via traditional channel, and of course their marketing. Now, therefore, If I was the CMO of boat, I would possibly not think that creative is my core competency. There are many other elements to it which I need to get right, and creative honestly is a very small part.
So, if I were to sum that up, your core competency should be the driver, and your core competency, just because you're not making the product, will not become the brand or the creative. There are so many permutations and combinations between the product and the brand, like your new designs, innovation, your consumer insights, and therefore, of all of this, you need to decide what your core competence is and then outsource the rest of it, of which, for a large part of the organizations, the creative will end up being outsourced to these agencies.
Correct. I'll give you another example, Sharon. I don't think many people would know this, but Pidilite has an in-sourced design agency.
Oh, okay.
We have our own design department. Yeah, we do our own artworks. We design our own packaging. Yeah, we don't outsource it.
And why is that? That's not a core competence.
So now this is where the trick lies. So I think Pidilite very early on wanted to make sure that one of obviously manufacturing and giving quality product was one of the core competency in these categories where a lot of fly by night operators come in and who are not able to deliver consistent quality over a period of time. So good high quality consistent products was one core competency. Second, because these categories are commoditized, Pidilite was clear that sooner or later, once they've set the quality benchmark, people will copy them. And hence, very early on, they said that we want trademarked designs. Yeah, so we own our own molds. We have, trademarked shapes, and we go fairly aggressive against our copyright infringers, trademark infringers, identicals, etc., etc. We have a very active legal department. So that's how the principles of the company were built. Now somebody might say Pidilite is also built on great advertising. Yes, it is, but we don't think it is our core competency, but design is. We build a lot of functionality in our design. Yeah, so all of that, therefore we have insourced it.
Amazing. I mean, I didn't know this at all, but yeah, I'm not a user of your product. I'm probably the receiver of it. But it's amazing that Pidilite has had the foresight not just to create the brand, but also protect it for such a long time. Brilliant stuff. But getting back to this, now we spoke about creative agencies being a little deeper than just digital agencies. But there are different kinds of people you interact with, when you engage with a digital agency or a creative agency, sorry.
Yep.
So, how are these creative agencies structured? So, I've tried explaining this to a few people myself, and there is always significant overlap between what the different departments within a creative agency does. Could you walk us through that?
Sure. Like any other business, obviously creative agency will have a lot of departments, a lot of verticals.
Hmm.
There are three client facing critical verticals that they have.
Hmm.
The first vertical is client servicing. So these are the guys who are you know possibly your interface to rest of the agency. They are the ones who will talk to you fairly regularly. They are the ones who will capture your requirements. They are the ones who will get the job done within the agency, and they are the ones who are responsible for all deliverables and timelines.
Hmm.
Then there is a vertical in the middle called planning.
Hmm.
Now planning is the thinking engine of the agency. So these are the guys who almost mirror your brand team. They will have assets slash resources who are equivalent to your brand managers or your category managers or your product managers, etc. Yeah, so they will have similar qualifications, similar ways of thinking. They are the ones who will specialize in understanding consumers, understanding insights, discovering new ones. Their biggest advantage is that the planners work on multiple brands across multiple categories. So therefore they are looking at the same human insights being utilized and leveraged in different forms in different categories, and hence they are able to build deeper understanding and bring nuances from their understanding into every brand that they work upon. So that's how they add tremendous amount of value. Yeah, so they will get you, fairly diverse experiences, fairly diverse examples that will help you, imagine a consumer better, that will help you empathize with your consumer better, etc., etc. Yeah. Then the third one, which is actually the money earner for the agency, is the creative department.
Therefore, the creative agency.
Therefore, the creative agency, so they are the ones who finally translate a client brief, which is, then chewed and digested by the planning agency, or the planning team of the agency, into a, creative, final creative which comes through. And within every creative team you would usually find two partners always. Each creative team always has two partners. One is called art, the second is called copy. Copy is the person who specializes in writing. Art is the person who specializes in visuals. Yeah, so they usually work together, and as partners they move around. Even when they change the jobs, the art and copy partner usually change jobs and go to the next agency together.
Tag
Yeah.
teams.
Yeah, it's like a tag team, and they build that kind of understanding together, and that's how they work, you know through their lives. So these are the three client facing parts of a creative agency. Of course they will have an admin department, HR department, finance department, etc., etc. Those are necessary to keep the agency functioning and running. Yeah, but the ones that matter to clients or marketers like us are these three.
You're listening to COB, Conversations on the Business of Brands. Your hosts are Sudeep Chawla, marketing practitioner, business leader, and educator to advertising and marketing professionals, and Sharavana Raghavan of Vitral Brand Expertise, growth consultants to consumer facing brands and businesses. For more information, go to cobcast.net. If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by telling your friends and rating us.
So the creative part is very clear because that's why the creative agency exists. And I also get the servicing part, which would equate it to a key account manager types, your point of contact within the agency. Now, if the planner is doing the same job as the brand manager, can companies exist without a brand manager and function just with the planner? Would that work?
I have seen in some cases companies relying on agency to do that job for them
Without a brand manager.
without a brand manager. So the brand managers on the company side are largely what I would call as process owners, who would complete the necessary processes for communication, innovation, delivery, etc. But bulk of the inciting work or the consumer work is done by the planners. But going back, you would need custodians of consumers on either side. There are sufficient number of internal customers of a marketing team within a company. So a brand management team within the company is also, as in one of the previous podcasts I said that as marketers we sell convictions. We first convince ourselves, then we convince people around us, and then we convince the world at large. So for selling conviction around us to the management, to our leadership team, to our sales partners, etc., you need a branding team within the company. And one of my realizations and the sort of companies that I worked with, where we have built very very long term relationships with agencies, is that us marketers have a certain kind of career that's built in our head. So therefore a brand manager would remain on a brand for 2 3 4 years, and then they will change jobs or they'll move to a new role. So actually over a period of time the real custodians of the brands are the planning teams, and the brand managers are mere passengers on that train. The ones who are good enough take charge of the coach and give it some new direction, but 90 95% of them just ride the train and get off at some station.
Does that mean the outsourced agency partner, who's the planner, has a stronger say on what happens on the brand than the brand manager, the brand team themselves?
Yeah, the brand managers might not like to admit it, but the fact is that we are all custodians of brands that we inherit, and where a lot of people, maybe more intelligent than us, have worked in the past. And so therefore there is this onerous responsibility to, number one, carry it forward. A lot of the time, a lot of the marketing teams just get tired doing that. Then the ones who are lucky enough, who have the right mandate, right attitude, and the right energy, they are the ones who possibly either add acceleration to it or change direction. During that period is when they need, the partnerships with creative agency. Also, there are multiple other partners, but since this episode is dedicated to creative agencies,
Mhm.
I'm just staying with that.
Right. So there is no real line demarcating a brand manager's role versus a planner's role.
Yeah, you could possibly say that all the work which is supposed to be done within the company to get a communication or a product out, managing product life cycle, etc., is done by the brand manager, while the core brand thinking, consumer thinking, etc., is co-owned by both guys. Yeah, both approach it from a very different point of view. The brand is the center of brand managers universe, so therefore they always think brand out. It is difficult to make them think consumer in, while planners ideally specialize in consumer in thinking.
Right. So, and that is precisely why we come across a lot of the planners today being called the brand strategists, because they are being the primary brand thinkers versus any in-house brands that they might be operating,
Yeah,
the brand without brand managers too.
yeah.
Great. So with all this overlap, with such what do you say, long-term engagement and all that, we also spoke about briefing these agencies well. How does a marketer leverage this creative agency properly and to the fullest?
So I think there are three, four factors to it. First is building long-term relationship. Second is treating your agency as equal, where you build and strive together. Third is giving your agency due respect. And fourth, and the finance guys would beat me up for this, is paying them well.
Okay, my laughter is changing various degrees with each point in that. So let's go a little deeper on each one of them. Agencies today are fired on a monthly basis. What do you mean by building long-term relationship with the agency?
I don't know who is firing agencies on monthly basis. I just hope that none of my the agencies that I work with any such clients.
See, there's only one benchmark that agencies used to today:
Hmm.
ROAS.
Oh, you're then specifically stuck on some very specific performance marketing agencies whose only proposition is improving ROAS, and then they've set themselves up for such benchmark. They might as well live up to it. Yeah, but the ones that I'm talking about, creative agencies,
Hmm.
their KRAs are obviously long term, and they build brand KRAs.
Right.
But coming back, long term relationship, what I wanted to say uh, was that because you want the planning team and the creative team
Hmm.
to build brand intuition,
Hmm.
you need them to be with the brand for long enough for them to understand it,
Hmm.
and then to leverage that intuition.
Right.
Yeah.
And would
Now,
that apply just to the planners and the creators, but also to the servicing?
servicing is slightly easier to understand because they start understanding how the company works. Therefore, uh, you know uh, how much time does it take to get an approval to come back.
Hmm.
They are responsible for timelines, deadlines. They also know what appeals to somebody, how to present it, etc., etc. And I think all of those nuances are important. We are all in the business of building convictions,
Hmm.
and building conviction requires due consideration to the process as well as the content.
Got it.
Yeah, the
Got
content and context both are important. And so therefore, servicing, planning, as well as creative, the more residual knowledge that they have, the more intuition they'll be able to build, a more informed intuition they'll be able to build.
So that takes me to the next point you said: strive together. If I am to strive together with my creative agency, why am I even writing a brief? I've already strived for my part, right? Isn't striving independently to deliver a goal?
See, I think one critical realization every marketer must have is that finally agency is only helping them do their job. It is the marketer's job to get the communication out and get an effective and uh, efficient communication out such that the brand KRAs, KPIs are met. So therefore, agency is helping you do your job, right? So number one, that. Number two, you would ideally want your brand team and the planning team to be joined at the hip while they are working on any kind of consumer insighting or any kind of consumer work to deepen their understanding about the brand or their TG or their target group or target segment. Yeah, because you want that intelligence, that insight, that empathy to be built between the both teams. Yeah, both teams should equally get it because you want that knowledge to then become common brand lingo. Yeah, or common brand inference that they use to take the brand forward. And hence, you should ideally see both of them working together, and they should be driven by this common, brand ask, brand inquisitiveness.
Hmm.
And those, their tracks should be completely parallel to each other or rather intertwined with each other. Yeah, similarly, now this is just the planning team.
Right.
The creative team, for example, I found that, while we spoke about briefs, and
Hmm.
there was an entire, episode about it, where I found, a big aha for me was during this one workshop that I had attended, which was conducted by a, global team member from Cadbury network, and a workshop called Winning Briefs. And the big point that they were trying to deliver was that while you write the brief, your job is not to brief the agency, your job is to inspire the agency. If you remember, I spoke about the fact that while I write the brief, I narrate a story. Yeah, I don't read the brief, I don't give the brief in their hand. But even better than narrating a story is to try and inspire them, is to make the brief come alive. And if you are able to do that, then you are honestly setting them free, you are giving them a higher pedestal to operate from. And creative teams work best when they are inspired. Yeah, their job is to produce inspiring work, and hence you have to set them off with the right at the right pedestal. So therefore, that again, you have to strive for that. So you strived with the planning team, you're you're striving with the creative team.
Creative team. Yeah.
Last is servicing. Now servicing is somebody who bears the wrath of creative team as well as the client.
Sandwich.
He or she is completely sandwiched between the two. Now of course you have all the right to be aggressive on your timelines, to be demanding on your timelines, but the more understanding you are and the more inclusive you make them feel, that if you have an aggressive timeline, help them understand why it is so aggressive. And if you are able to build that kind of partnership, again the same, but to build that partnership you still have to strive. So all I'm trying to say is that what the creative agency is doing is they're doing your job which you thought was non-core. So therefore, number one, it is your job. You can't, really say I have done my job, now you do yours. It is your job which they are doing, and then you have to strive along with them to make sure that they give their damnedest best to it.
Right. Fair enough. Therefore, strive together.
Yep.
Now, give them due respect. I think you answered that already. But I'd dwell on the last part. How can you put a price tag or rather define one creative being worth more than another? So why should you pay them well? As long as you're happy with the creative, can't you just go with the cheaper version or the cheaper agency?
So I think there are some key parts to it. One is that if you give peanuts, you will only get monkeys. So let us all remember this principle. Therefore, everybody knows that you have to pay to get quality. So let's be clear about it. If you want to hire good people, you should be paying. And it is fairly clear, and agencies are also clear that way, that if you are not paying well, you're not on a great retainer, they will not give you the best talent. And it is a flywheel. You get good talent, you're able to produce better work, your ability to pay becomes better, etc., etc. So it becomes a flywheel. Yeah. And the flywheel works the other way also. You get poor talent, you get poor work, your brand doesn't get result, etc., etc. So
Fair
therefore,
enough.
yeah, so
Okay.
number one, you have to pay for quality. That's one. Whenever I've seen various ways of paying an agency, etc., there are two big principles to it, is what I believe. Number one is you pay for a lot of operational jobs that are supposed to be done on the brand, and therefore there is some amount of man hour calculation that your team as well as agency team should be able to come up with. And therefore you should know how many resources would you be needing for your work. Build some buffer on it, plus minus 20%, 30%. And then you should also know what is the per month or per hour wage that you are happy to pay, depending on the quality that you want. And some of these benchmarks are easily available. You can float a
RFP.
job and hundreds of people will apply. You will know what is their salary expectation. So therefore it is not very difficult to arrive at what is the amount that you should be paying to get your operational job well done. So that should take care of one part, which is the core retainer. Yeah. Number second is, then comes on work that you get done from the creative team. Now some part of the creative team, which is their creative studio, their film studio, etc., etc., which is completely on agency roles, and from time to time your teams will go there, get your job done. For that, usually they have a rate card. So that's how they bill everybody for that studio. So that becomes the second component of payment. The third component, what I usually am very much in favor of, is variable. Make them your partners against some brand or company goals that you have.
Even if they are not in complete control of it.
Yeah, of course. Like it is for everybody. They're
Right.
not in complete control of it, but they know that they can influence it, and give them a variable on that. You can possibly, if you want to make it even more fair, you can structure your variable into two part. Keep maybe 50%, 40% on things which are in their control, and 50% or 40% on things which are possibly beyond their control, but which is a net accumulative result that you and agency co-owns.
So they act as an owner of the business and not as a vendor to the business.
Correct. So they should earn when you are earning.
Got it.
They should not earn when you're not earning, because they if they want to be a partner, let them be a true partner. So I think that's how possibly I would say, and therefore be generous with it,
Hmm.
because you want them to try their hardest to be the best for you. Yeah, and you don't want them skimping on work. And if you don't want them skimping on work, please don't skimp on paying them.
Got it. So you're saying agencies should be not just joint at the hips, but at the toes, at the pockets, at the hands, at the heads, everywhere.
Yeah.
So are you advocating that agencies should never be fired?
I would possibly say that the agency should be changed only when it becomes really, really impossible to work with them. One of the core beliefs that I operate from is that there are no bad agencies, there are only bad briefs.
Okay.
Yeah. So therefore, if an agency has done some good work for you in the past,
Uh,
they can't suddenly become bad. Unless
mm,
obviously there are external circumstances, like there is mass attrition in the agency, or
mm,
there's leadership change, or agency has been bought over, etc. Those are circumstances that you can't control,
right.
and might mean a tectonic shift for the agency itself. But by and large, if you think that the quality of work has changed, it is
Mm,
time to possibly introspect
mm,
internally also. Yeah.
got it.
And as I was saying earlier, the residual knowledge, the informed intuition, etc., are some things which are such big advantages that you should think twice, thrice, four times before you even entertain the thought of changing your agency.
Mm. And this also goes the other way, right? Even before you recruit an agency for a new brand, you must actually look at how long people stick on to specific agencies and prioritize hiring them over ones that have a lot of churn.
Yeah,
to ensure consistency.
yeah, yeah. I would say so. Yes.
Hmm. Interesting, but now I want to, towards the end of the episode, you spoke about how these great client agency relationships result in what magical work. So you worked with two legendary companies where agencies are truly working as partners. So can you give us a few examples of how the relationship actually ended up delivering magic on any of the brands you worked on?
See, I think you're right. Both the companies that I work with have nurtured very very long term relationships with a creative agencies. I've had Ogilvy as my creative partner in both the companies. In fact, some of the planners, etc., have been the same
Yeah.
also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, some people from the creative team have also been same. So I've
So
been
that
fairly lucky.
the residual intuition kind of continues across companies for you.
Maybe not for the brand, but for me, yes. So that is what I have seen. Now the fact is that both these companies have brands which strive to be better every day. So for example, when I used to work on Cadbury Dairy Milk, now Cadbury Dairy Milk wanted to work on trying to become salient in various meetha occasions. So that was something that they were doing at that point in time.
Hmm.
And so therefore all agencies, not just creative agency but your research agency, qualitative as well as quantitative, yeah, your creative agency, your digital agency, your media agency were all clued into this fact that this is what Dairy Milk wants to do. Yeah, so therefore, number one, they're all on lookout for insights, opportunities, as well as threats around that. Number two, once you start on a certain route, once you've arrived at a certain articulation, etc., then it intuitively keeps coming to the creative team or to the planning team that this is something that we should keep doing ahead, or this is
Okay.
something that we should do ahead. There are many things. For example, this you've seen Cadbury Dairy Milk silk advertising. Yeah, one of the things that has remained consistent in all advertising is the song.
Yeah. Kiss me.
Yeah, so now this song, just the fact that the creative understood what we want to say. Yeah, this song, if you listen to the lyrics of the song, this is Silk the chocolate singing to you the consumer. For somebody to be able to do this, they have to really really understand the product, its proposition, and the consumer really well.
Right.
Yeah,
Should sink into them. Should have already sunk into them to come up with
correct,
something like this.
correct. So now when you build relationships, incredible relationships where people are truly the partners, etc., they're able to do such deep work. Similarly, when you look at Pidilite, the sort of work that you see on Fevicol now, when I see Piyush and Prasoon, even today, after getting all possible laurels that any advertising professional could hope for in their lifetime, still see them bubbling with excitement every time a new script for Fevicol occurs to them. And I've seen this as a process that they don't need any invitation, they don't need a brief also. The script would occur to them and they will just come by and narrate. Yeah, both of them will jam together, they'll create something and then they'll come by and narrate. you know why? Because they've understood what the brand is all about, what is the brand wanting to do, what is
Right.
the task on the brand, etc., etc. And you will see that over a period of time, Fevicol TVCs have reached a stage where, number one, they don't have any dialogues.
Yeah. And it's been a while,
Yeah,
right? Ah,
and they're very simplistic,
yeah.
but they're considered iconic and they're considered very memorable.
Right.
Yeah, again the same thing. When if you listen to Piyush, whenever he talks about Fevicol, he will tell you that he was a very very young copywriter when somebody gave him Fevicol and said कि ये ऐसे एक छोटा सा ब्रांड है, तू ये ले ले, कर जो करना है इस पे, you do whatever you want to do on it. And he started on Asian Paints as well as Fevicol at
Really?
that point in time. Yeah, and over a period of time, obviously he has worked well, and the company has invested tremendously into this relationship, and the feelings are mutual.
Hmm.
And now Piyush would know these brands much better than any of the current brand managers would.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Why
and I've
brand
seen
managers?
that.
I'd go even a few layers above and say you would understand better than most people within the company,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
brand custodians, you might say.
Hmm.
Yeah, so in fact, on my brand, the brand that I am responsible for, There
Hmm.
also, whenever I've had a discussion with Piyush,
Hmm.
he understands the brand at many levels.
Hmm.
So therefore his questions are more sharper. He will understand you much better. So there is tremendous value that I see in the creative team, the creative agency being a long term partner, having a very very good idea of your brand, having a very good idea of your consumer, and thereby they are swifter, deeper, better in their delivery.
Lovely. And I think from what you left unsaid is that they don't just work with you with a long term engagement. They actually make your life so much easier by
Hmm.
doing most of the thinking for you.
Yeah.
And what more could you ask? I think that's a brilliant point you made, and I think it caps it off precisely to say why agency relationships have to be nurtured by brand managers and brand owners to create magic in the long term. I think that caps it off brilliantly, and I think this is a very very important episode, a very important point, because like I said, when agencies are changing at such a random pace, it requires a lot of brands and businesses to sit back and analyze what they want out of an agency relationship. And if this magic can be created, who can say no to magic?
Thank you for listening to COB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's COBBCAST.net.